Hello, I am Brian Foster. Today I'm talking about Spiritism, and we are bringing you through the mist, Chapter 9, The Harvest of Jealousy. And in the previous chapters, a spirit whose name is Fred, he wished to remain nameless, but people called him Fred. And he had awoken on a grassy knoll, and he just recently passed over while he was trying to rescue a young boy on the busy streets of London in the late 19th century. He walked. He went to a center. He saw this great healing event. He was walking with the kind of the commander, the chief of sort of a sanitarium to help spirits who have just recently passed over. And now he's walking some more with another person to a unspecified location. I think the person's house, but we will see as we get into it. Before I begin, let's have a short prayer. Dear Jesus and God, and please allow all of us listening to this and to anything is to open our hearts and minds for messages and signs and signals from the spirit world so we can follow the path to the light, so we can renew ourselves and make ourselves better and take out our primitive emotions and replace those with civilized ones and understand on earth we are here to improve. Amen. So, if you would like to learn about Spiritism as I interpret this wonderful book through the mist, and of course the link to the book in PDF description is in the description below. If you would like to learn about Spiritism, please download on my site nwspiritism.com the free PDF Spiritism 101, the Third Revelation. And for those, I would say afterwards, but some of you want to do it before. I would recommend then you read the Headwaters of Spiritism, the Spirits book, codified by Allan Kardec. Allan Kardec wrote a series of 1,019 questions in the Spirit of Truth, as promised by Jesus Christ in the New Testament. Organized the spirits to talk to different mediums, and Allan Kardec did not codify the answers to the questions unless separate mediums had similar or the same answers. So this is all very organized. So this was all done on purpose in the 1850s to bring us to our technological advancement at the time and cultural advancement at the time. And now spiritist mediums are still giving us more and more information as we continue. And the information will come. In the spirit world has told us that Jesus has promised that more and more people will have messages from Christ, from the spirit world, to enlighten them, to tell them about reincarnation and the process of karma. All that is all going to be revealed to us so we can understand that as we move from a planet of atonement to a planet of regeneration. If you want to know what a planet of regeneration is, read my free PDF, Spiritism 101, the Third Revelation, download it from my site. And it's also available in Kindle, paperback, and in Audible format. Let's get started. Let me take this off. This is The Harvest of Jealousy, Chapter 9. How far we traveled during our conversation, I've not the remotest idea. But if the change aspect of the country formed any criterion of the distance, it was by no means inconsiderable. When I was at liberty to notice our surroundings, I discovered that we were passing through a district possessing as its principal feature a multitude of secluded spots and quiet retreats, but without any indication of a road to guide a stranger, and therefore an interminable labyrinth to anyone who had not a perfect knowledge of its key. But at the same time, a sure asylum to the wary and the hunted who stood in need of such a haven of refuge. Of course, what he was talking about there is the fact that most of the people around there had just recently come from physical life or from the lower zone of the dark abyss, which is a type of purgatory, and they needed resting. And that's kind of also the idea of the planet of generation. When we, as a planet of atonement, we are here because we are to right our past wrongs, learn to take out primitive emotions, replace those with civilized ones. As a planet of regeneration, our trials and tribulations become much simpler, much easier. It's more of a learning experience instead of a heavy, dramatic atmosphere of episodes and periods where we kind of have to rip out our primitive emotions. We'll have most of that done. Now, by those who have not been able to get to this uh, plateau, they will not be reincarnated on a planet of regeneration. They'll be sent to other planets, either planets of atonement or even more primitive planets if they have not improved themselves. Let's carry on. The atmosphere was heavy compared to that which had recently been accustomed. The wind, although not cold, had a chilliness had not experienced before. The trees were more somber in appearance, with dark shadows lingering beneath them. The flowers had lost the brilliance and fragrance which had so impressed me at the home of rest. He must be declining. He must be walking down towards the lower zone, because this is a typical, as things become more enlivened, more beautiful, more radiate, more that will actually reflect the spirits that go by them as you go higher and higher. Now he's talking just the opposite. Well, the influence of the place seemed to whisper that the severity of sorrow was just taking its departure, although it was still a matter of doubt whether peace could be induced to accept the vacancy thus created. Presently, my companion turned aside and bade me follow him, threading his way as he spoke through the low-hanging branches of the trees, which threatened to hide him entirely from my view unless I quickened my pace and diligently watched the direction he took. A dozen steps behind, our track was obliterated, and I constantly wondered by what sign or power Kushna pushed so confidently forward. My attention was also attracted to a certain moisture apparently exhaled from the leaves, in which I was convinced would speedily saturate us if we had far to travel under such conditions. I was further conscious of something more than curiosity, almost alarm, as I saw the colors gradually fading, first from the robes of my conductor, and then from my own as we advanced. So I think he's definitely going down in spiritual elevation, probably to talk and with people who are at that level, and they are unable to go higher because they're not spiritually mature enough. And that's the way the spirit world works. As you go higher and higher, you become less dense, meaning you have more energy and less matter. The lower the spirit, the more dense. Now, we, of course, are the most dense. We are physical. But then even as you pass, and if you're in the lower zone or the dark abyss, which is a type of purgatory, you are the most dense, but still less dense than a physical person. And, of course, in the spirit realm, wherever you are, you're inside and outside. Your outside reflects your inside. So if you're not a very nice person, you don't look very nice on the outside, and vice versa. Whereas on Earth, I've read many stories of spiritists saying that they watched this just beautiful, handsome man or beautiful woman go to sleep, and then as they went to roam the spirit world, there were just these ugly bodies coming out, because that's how they are inside. So you can be fooled here. But as I had full employment in clearing my way, I was compelled to refrain from asking questions for the present. And when we emerged from the trees, our clothing no longer possessed its delicate blue and pink tints, but had been changed to dark gray. And what surprised me equally was the fact that of its being perfectly dry, in spite of the showers of dew which had so copiously fallen upon us. Now, let me talk about this one too. In the spirit world, if you walk into water completely, and you completely immerse in the water, and you come out, you're dry. Now, that gives you one aspect of an objective environment versus a subjective environment. An objective environment, where we are, you walk into the water, it's wet, you become wet. In an objective environment, you walk into the water, you're surrounded by water, but you don't wish to be wet. You come out of the water, you're not wet. It corresponds to your mind. And also might be a property of that water in the spirit world too, as decided by a spirit. You are refreshed. You feel the water when you're in the water. Not like you are guarded against it, but you when you come out, you're dry, and you can actually walk underwater, and you're fine because you can't die. You don't need to breathe. These are just some of the small little changes that, that sound so small yet reveal so much. And this is why I love reading literature like this, and especially literature by spiritist mediums talking to spirits as probably organized by some of the managers and people, ministers that work for Jesus Christ, because they'll tell us these little things and we have to read into them and say, okay, oh, that's how that works. And there's another example. Oh, water doesn't make you wet. Interesting. I'll carry on. As Krishna paused for me to overtake him, he smiled at my perplexity and, without waiting for me to ask, proceeded to give this explanation of such an astounding phenomenon. This, he said, is perhaps one of the most tender and beneficent provisions of our Father. Whoever comes to visit or minister to one of the friends located here experiences this transformation upon nearing the end of their journey. The object is to enable us to meet on apparently equal terms by preventing them from knowing the difference in our condition, and thus to enable us to give them greater assistance. As you will soon discover in the case of Marie, the state of all at this point of development is one that requires the most careful and sympathetic treatment, and the friends employed in the mission are specifically appointed by Mahim from among those most closely associated with himself. And you'll see this as a general theme over and over again in Spiritist literature, is that the high spirits will go to great length to say, oh, I'm not superior to you. And in fact, when a spirit wanted to argue with one of the managers of a hospital, and he thought he was going to have a real battle on his hands, he went into this like managing director's office, and the first thing the managing director said, I am just a humble person like you. I've done wrong. I'm just here to help you. And you see that over and over again. And that spirits, when higher spirits, when they go down to the lower zones or they go down to the dark abyss, they will make themselves more dense, and they won't say, and there's none of this condensation. There's condensation, I should say. I was thinking about the water. And none of this lording it over and say, I'm superior to you. Look at me. No, there is true love and humbleness, not the fake humbleness, but the true love and humbleness. Because now, why are they truly wonderful people? Because they all have been through what all these people are, the lower level people have been through. They know that these people are just at a lower level of maturity in their journey towards perfection, and that even on this earth, whatever you see people doing horrible things, you say, oh, that person's horrible. What you need to do is, so you don't hate them, you don't waste your primitive emotion, you just think to yourself, you go, well, I've probably done things worse than that. And you probably have. You probably have. And therefore you go, I hope that they learn in the future. Don't hate them, feel sorry for them. You can hope that they end up in jail or arrested or whatever, that's fine. That's not hate. That's just hoping that justice happens here on earth. But fear not. For every action, there is a reaction. Justice will happen. It may not be human justice, but it will be justice. That person will learn. Horrible dictators like Stalin and Mao, who killed many, will not escape. They will learn that was not the right idea, right? Fidel Castro, who just died recently, will learn that he was wrong in being mean and horrible to so many people for so long. But don't waste any hate. Don't hate anybody. Just know that they are not as spiritually mature as you are on your scale. Although we may be fooling ourselves too. And and to let you know, what I've been told in my past lives. I know a lot of people have past life regression, and they've been told these certain things. I'm sure many people don't talk about the negative things that they've heard, right? Because I knew the one guy who said, yeah, I had a past life regression. All I saw was myself being killed, and in different manners, as a Native American woman. And he laughed about it, and I said, yeah, well, you saw that because at some earlier date, earlier life, you probably killed all, and this was all in payback for what you did. He goes, yeah, I know. And so if people, when you have a past life regression and you want to be queen of something or someone like that, it's not really a good idea, because the more powerful you are, the more scope and opportunity you have to do horrible things, and that means the more things you have to pay for in your next lives. So be careful. Okay. And of course, I've been told I've done horrible things. Hopefully, I am living proof that being taught lessons in previous lives changes you, right? Okay. Now I'll carry on. And this is the spirit talking with Fred. The condition of all those you'll find here is one of repose, succeeding a period of indescribable agony, the hush of uncertainty following in the wake of the storm of hell, and the soul is indisposed to rouse itself from the dreamy numbness in which it finds its present relief from the suffering which, being scarcely over, so vividly impressed upon its memory. Now, he's talking about people who've been in the lower zone or the dark abyss. And those places are horrible places. Now, when Dante talked about the different levels of hell, he wasn't that far off, right? Now the lower zone, there's cities, and you can accommodate yourself, but the lower you go, the more there is constant pain. I mean, it can get bad. You do not want to go there. And of course, that's not done to punish. It's done for you to see and you to experience what you made other people experience. It is done for your edification, not for just for raw punishment. And when you decided that, oh, this is a horrible environment, you will be helped up. And this is what these people are. They've probably been in that horrible environment. Then they finally turned their eyes to God and Jesus and the spirit world and said, help me, Christ. Okay, I'll carry on. Hope is not yet strong enough to counteract the fear that any exertion may result in return of the dreaded past. Confidence is not able to supplant distrust, and the only means by which they can be roused from the state of lethargy is by association with the messengers from the hills of wisdom, who inspire the feeble confidence of the needy ones by the assurance of the realization of that hope they have gained. Make sure I'm on the... Okay. This change in our appearance, then, is but another variation of the great law of love. I asked. Precisely so, he responded, nothing but love. Our path now lay down a gentle slope between the hills, but before we reached the level of the valley, we turned as to round a clump of trees having remarkable wealth of foliage and branches which swept the ground. On reaching the further side, however, I discovered that they served to conceal the entrance to a pleasant dell in which was situated a solitary house, the first I had seen in the whole district. Now, remember that even though the trees and the foliage and the atmosphere look inferior to Fred, for people coming from the lower zone, this was heaven. This is paradise. This is indescribably beautiful. Everything's relative, right? Everything's in relation to other people. The first I'd seen in the whole district, the little domain was a welcome retreat for one who wished to live a life of solitude. 100 safeguards having been raised, natural and unsuspicious, against intrusion, and without a trace of path or indication of any presence in the vicinity. It was almost beyond the range of possibility for a visitor to make his appearance in that peaceful dell, except those who by their knowledge of the homestead gave evidence of their interest in the welfare of its solitary residents. The garden, grounds, and general arrangement offered every inducement for the exercise and development of the mind, with abundant scope to wean the heart from sorrow, in congenial and ever-varying employment. The house was not a large building, such as one that would have been out of character in these surroundings, but it was exceedingly cheerful and picturesque. A mountain home engaged for the purpose of repose and restoration, with everything provided to make one forget the past and care nothing for the future. but yet by no means a permanent habitation, being devoid of that society for which the healthy mind seeks and shapes to find inaccessible. So let's talk about that for a second. So there's this one person in this house, and they have it protected. It was screened by a wall of forest and bushes. Who knows exactly how it was? The description is not um, complete, I'm sure. Now, they've done this in many different ways. In fact, they've done this with whole cities. There is this passage in the book, and I talk about this, Spirits in the Spirit Universe, book 2 of Spiritism, where these spirits went and they rescued 144,000 souls from the city in the lower zone, and they were in the mine, actually mining something. And there's actually cities. They build things, they create things, they have armies, they fight each other. It's like the mafia being in charge of little outposts, right? They took them away from that horrible city, and they founded another city a little bit further on. They actually even had wars with the other cities around them, trying to defend themselves because they weren't higher by then. But then, as collectively, and they sent spirits down to help them to raise their spiritual maturity. As their spiritual maturity rose, unbeknownst to them, their city rose. And the other cities, the inferior cities around them with inferior spirits, could no longer find them. They were at a higher level, and those people could not attain a higher level. It would be too painful. Just as probably the person living in this house could not walk up in the opposite direction as these two spirits came to them, because that would be too painful for them. They would not be quite ready for that. You have to be, the higher you go, the more you have to be less dense person, meaning more energy and less matter. This also happened even in cities in different levels of heaven. There is a city in one levels of heaven, and the people of the city have been led by this wonderful spirit and her ministers, and they've done such great job in improving themselves that they were all invited into this big hall, and they came into this big hall, and the leader of the city, this wonderful spirit, told them, "Look, you've all done a great job, and we are going to elevate and expand the city." And so what happened is then the spirits cause the walls, the superior spirits cause the walls become transparent. And before them, they saw a brand new city, and it was bigger, a larger city, more parks, has a greater area for the leader of the city and the ministers, and it had more room for more people to come into that city to be helped. Everything was superior. Now, and they were all excited. They all come out and they go, "Oh, this is great." So ask yourself, and this is a communication from spirits to the Reverend G. Val Owen, who never said he was a spiritist, but everything in his books speak of spiritism. And I found him by reading a book called Voltaire. It's not in English yet. And they talked about having a gathering in the spirit world where a lot of the people who were very instrumental in spreading spiritism were. And I read through this list. And in fact, I was sitting in my chair reading something else, and my wife was reading this book. And she says, "Brian," I go, "Huh?" Because I had my concentration. And then she like touched me on the arm, said, "Look at this." And so I looked at that. And it was a list of people had been at that party. And it was mostly Portuguese, Spanish names, right? But then I saw this guy was Reverend G. Val Owen. That was a typical English name, right? English American name. Australian or New Zealand, Canada, whatever. It was one of those type of names. I looked him up and found out he was a reverend in the beginning of the 20th century who wrote books that were psychographed from groups of spirits. And then I actually had to I got the books. Actually, I had to order some directly from England. It's just amazing. And he just told us so many things. And I really go through his books in my series of 3 books. Heaven and Below, book 1, Spirits in the Spirit Universe, book 2, and How We're Guided by Spirits in book 3. And I take information he gave and I back it up with information from other Spiritist writers. But to make a long story short, in this one of these passages in this book, as he was told by the spirits, is that this whole city was raised. But not only raised, it was expanded. Now ask yourself, okay, how would you do that here on the physical earth? You'd have to bulldoze all the outlaying parts. You'd have to destroy or move the buildings and move them out or change them. It would almost be impossible if you were like between in a valley or if you were in a crowded area already. But in the spirit world, they could do it by thought. A group of spirits could do that by thought. So what does that tell you about the spirit world? The spirit world is a logical concept that you can change by your mind, and that we are here on earth learning how to use our mind to make what we envision in our minds, and that you cannot create with your mind unless you have full control over your mind and full control over your emotions. Now you know why you go through pretty hard trials and tribulations. It's to take out those primitive emotions. Every hard trial is for you to analyze yourself in deep introspection and see, did I lose my temper? Did I say things that were wrong? Was I mean? Was I too violent? And tell yourself, I have to stop that. I have to rewire my brain. I have to learn not to do that. And that's why here on earth, that's our job, is to rewire our brain. So I just want to give you these examples. I'll carry on. As we emerged from the narrow path by which we entered, 2 ladies were walking leisurely across the grounds away from us, with arms affectionately intertwined around each other. They looked like kindred spirits whose thoughts, too deep for words, were drawing from the well of silence a draught of refreshing sympathy. Their preoccupation gave me an opportunity of observing them before they were made aware of our presence. From the moment I beheld them, I was confident that the shorter of the 2 was present in the capacity of minister, or I should not use the more familiar appellation, angel, following the example of the great teacher, laying aside her rightful state, that she may by her sacrifice be the more powerfully competent to help her unfortunate sister. The taller of the twain bore very conspicuously the evidence of weakness and weariness, and was only too glad to avail herself of the strength of her companion, so unassumingly placed at her disposal. Okay, so here's this one woman who's being helped by this superior spirit, and now 2 other spirits are coming, and she's been given this whole secluded area to recover. This shows you the amount of effort and resources that are put at our disposal to become better people. You cannot estimate, you cannot guess the amount of help and guidance and supervision we have on a daily, hourly, and minutely basis. Before I discovered Spiritism, I thought, we're on Earth. I believed in God, but we're far away. This planet's, on the far end of the universe, and we're just sit here for I don't know why. But now I know through the gift of Spiritism given to us, codified with a Spirit's book, which was the first. And just to me, yes, this is the truth, right? There's no hell forever. There's always a second chance. You're loved. You got to go through bad times, but hey, that's to make you a very powerful spirit. So think about just this one spirit, all these people helping. Think about yourself, and then meditate and pray and start looking at the signs and signals of who can help you. And I actually talk about this, and it's more kind of a more personal book, the 7 Tenets of Spiritism. It's about how I found Spiritism and how I can detect the signs and signals of when they help me. Now, before then, I thought, this is by chance. But as Carl Jung talked about synchronicity, this is a truism. Synchronicity is help from the spirit world to help you have breakthroughs. That is real. The spirit world, Jesus, under the leadership of Jesus Christ, loves you like you cannot believe. In fact, the great medium, Francisco Chico, his nickname is Chico Xavier, said, "You cannot imagine how much you are loved." Okay, let me carry on. I made no. Oh wait, Azena has been here almost constantly since Marie came. As we stood watching them, I made no reply. I would rather he had not spoken. I wish my friend was quick to appreciate. And I was left undisturbed to witness a practical lesson in nursing and sympathy, which awed me with its angelic tenderness and unrestrained devotion. Such a vision of salvation needed no interpreter. My heart stood still in its sacred presence, while it made me conscious of a closer touch with God than I had ever felt before. My soul trembled with the holy tension put upon it. My feet paused in a direct refusal to cross the threshold of the temple while the fragrant incense of such a worship was ascending. And but for Krishna's interference, I should probably have yielded to my strong desire to leave that hallowed spot. But, standing thus, I solved a problem in spiritual mathematics, as I saw the antithesis of life, heaven and hell, curved by the power of love until they touched, overlapped, and blended to form the circle of divinity. In that illustration, I grasped a stupendous assurance that it would be impossible for any single soul ultimately to resist that gravitation which operates in the higher life for the purpose of lifting up the fallen or of rescuing the lost. And the words of Jesus, "until he find them," came to me at the moment with a force and meaning I had never seen before. And this is true. This we were told over and over in the spirit world, that we have this longing to find spiritual contentment, that we want to find God, we want to find Jesus, we want to be better, we want to listen to our conscience. But we have these primitive emotions, and we have these outside stimuli telling us, short term, you can be happy, right? Go shopping, pleasure yourself, all that type of stuff. Make more money just so you can buy this good and make you feel good. And our whole life is going through and teaching us to deny these things. And why do we have to learn to deny them? Is because as we get higher and higher in the spirit world and we go help other planets, we'll encounter them all the time. And that will help us love these people, because we know that they're going through the same, the same temptations as we did. And we know it's hard, right? Because we always fail. Eventually we succeed. But this is where the spirit world is not heavy-handed. The spirit world, as I said before, especially like when people say, "Oh, this prophet got this wrong," or "this person was wrong in that." Yes, they could be wrong in what they say as far as what heaven's like, or these little things, according to your idea. They may not be wrong. Could be you or I am wrong. But what will happen, and I'll give you the example I've said many times, but I'll give it another one. Edgar Cayce, who was this wonderful American medium, did not believe in reincarnation, very religious. But as he kept going through these people's past lives, like, this person used to be in Atlantis. He finally saw that, oh yeah, I guess there must be reincarnation. Now, did the spirits tell him, "Edgar, you're an idiot. There's reincarnation. Don't you know that?" No, they don't do that. They don't do that. They'll let you. They'll give you this is what Spiritism does for all of us. They'll put this knowledge in front of you and say, "Okay, here's some data you may want to look at." And they're not going to say, everything you ever believed until before it was wrong. They'll say, "No, look at this data and you make your own decision." It's all internal. And how the spirit world encourages us to become better. Here on earth, they give us little visions, little dreams, all sorts of things. And then in the spirit world, if you're like a lower level, they'll take you up to the higher level. Go, "Look, you want to come and see what it's like up here? Oh, this is great. I want to work for that." It's all just giving you data and information so you can self-motivate. Because they don't want to impose anything on you, because then it's artificial. They want you to make the decision, so it's deep in the foundation of your character, deep in your heart. That's why they're not going to tell you, oh, you're totally wrong. And that's why spirits will come, and these are high spirits, and they'll say, oh, it's Jesus talking to me. Well, probably not. It's some other spirit, but you want to call me Jesus? Fine. I'm going to give you this information. They won't correct you like that. And then there's many people say, well, God spoke to me. Well, most probably not. I've never heard of God talking to anyone in any spiritual literature I've seen. Spiritual literature tells us, even from the Spirit's book, we cannot understand God. And even the spirits in heaven, the heavens around the earth, cannot understand God. Now, Jesus is higher than the heavens around the earth. And they say he probably has an understanding of God. And that's why they say is to understand God, you first must understand Jesus Christ, because he's a pure spirit and he's closer. But you can't understand God. You can understand someone closer to God. But that's an explanation. That's why you don't get too mad at prophets when you think, oh, they're wrong. And the other thing is you don't get mad at prophets when they give you a date. Because first of all, they should never give you a date, because there's no dates in heaven, and dates are hard to figure out because they have no concept of time in heaven. And there was a good explanation, and they said, well, to get kind of a date, we kind of look at the shadow of the earth and we see kind of how it's moving, and we just kind of estimate something. But it's tough, right? Maybe 2 weeks or maybe 6 months. That's why mostly what prophets will say is this occurrence, this will happen, then the next will happen. Now, like there will be a volcano, then there will be something else. But now what you don't know is that this volcano will happen, for instance, but how long will it take for the next occurrence? They can't really tell you. But they'll give you events, markers. They won't say, yeah, on February 1st, this definitely is, this stream will change its course. No, they're not going to say that. If they did, they're probably got too excited and misinterpreted something. And believe me, it's very easy to misinterpret things. Not that I'm a medium, but I've talked to mediums, and they've told me things about myself or some other things that are around me, and I knew they were wrong, but I knew that they were close because they partially misinterpreted probably what was told them. So it's hard. It is hard. It's a difficult job. Okay. Let me carry on. There were no outward signs to indicate the extremes, which were linked together by the encircling arms of these two women. But the perceptions of my soul were quickened to discern that a legion phantoms from each of the two conditions peopled that spot, and wrestled with a terrible vigor for the victory. The winds paused as they passed by to watch the issue of the conflict. The flowers trembled alternatively with hope and fear. The trees folded their arms with statuesque solidity, and even the grass bade its pulse stand still lest the absorption of nourishment. The movement of its expansion should give advantage to the enemy of life. Yet in this audible silence I did not fear or doubt the issue. Why, I cannot tell, except it was that Krishna endowed me with this confidence, by which I realized that truth and love alone have an inherent immortality. Death, pain, and hell are mortal, and having once been failed, they can never rise again. And let me say this for people who are afraid of reincarnation because they'll fail again. You are given your conscience and your instinct. And as you live life after life, you build that up and it becomes more solid in your character. So you will not make the same mistakes again as you made in your previous life. Now, it could happen. I'm not saying it's impossible, but it's doubtful. Let me give you just a really tiny example. In this life, I'm sure everyone knows people who drink to excess and smoke and do all, drugs or whatever. In this life, my wife and I, who were destined to marry, we drink an occasional drink. We never smoked. I tried it once. I said, who likes this? None of that. Why? Why did we have, when all the culture around us said, come on, have fun, do this? We said, no, we're not doing it. Why we? Because we'd probably done that in the past and said, this is not a good idea. There's one small example of how you carry over your character and your instinct and your conscience from previous lives. And then what they say is spirits cannot regress. And that also is true, like if you're a spirit, you're always in a human form. You can never go back to an animal. That doesn't happen. You always, stay at a human free willed level, and as you go higher and higher, the more advanced human. Okay, we carry on. The omnipotence of right, surrounded and enveloped us by its mystic influence, thrilled me with its power, bidding me stand still, as the prophet of Sinai once commanded the Israelites to stand in such a presence and see the salvation of our God. Still, unconscious of our approach, their communion continued its unbroken flow until they reached a point in the grounds where some distant object was brought within their view, the sight of which roused Maria from her reverie, prompting a degree of animation, and interest which contrasted forcibly with her previous tranquility. I was not unpleasantly affected at the change, since it broke the protracted spell which had enthralled me, and I was again anxious to be brought into closer contact and learn the story of her in whom my conductor manifested such a deep interest. I was curious, however, to know what had wrought such a change in her manner, and asked him for the explanation. From that point, they obtained a magnificent view of the country, he replied, extending to the region of the hall from which we had come. This brings back Marie to a somewhat indefinite recollection of a home in which she slept her first exhaustion away, after she was induced to leave the place of her torment. The memory of that brief period between the time when she awoke and her coming here, Azina uses to inspire her hope and desire to get away and remingle in those scenes, and for that purpose they will remain as long as possible where they are. We, however, may be of equal assistance in another way, and so I think it is well to make them aware of our presence now. Within this lie projected a small but brilliant flash which immediately arrested their attention. Maria's face positively beamed with pleasure as she recognized who was calling her, and relinquishing her embrace of Azina, she ran towards us and greeted Kushna with all the affection of a daughter. My presence was forgotten in those first moments of reunion. Now, so when he said live, small but brilliant flash, what he did, and this is what is also in John's book Revelation, when he says these swords came out of people's mouth. When you in the spirit world, there's different ways of communication. One is thought to thought, right? You're speaking to someone's mind. Another way is you send them pictures, and when you send them a picture, a flash comes out of your mouth, like a little lightning or a little sword coming out, right? Flashing sword, I think it was. So he sent her a picture that I'm here. My presence was forgotten in those first moments of reunion, not being at all necessary to their happiness. And since there is no formality of introduction demanded in this life, I joined Azina and left Kushna to make all the necessary explanations, then called for me when he desired my company. I was surprised to find how free and unrestrained our intercourse was from the moment we met. Turning from our friends as we walked by mutual consent towards the point at which they were standing, when Kushna called them, as we did so, I asked, "Does this place seem dull and gloomy to you in comparison with your own home?" "Dull," she exclaimed, her face suffused with the brightness of her smile. No, anything but that. Heaven consists in condition more than its locality, and to have a share in driving the clouds from poor Maria's life is quite sufficient to turn any place into a heaven. So as he was talking to Azina. So Azina appreciates any type of service she can do. I was silenced, for it was by no means difficult to conceive that heaven would always be found closely attended upon such a companion, and I could appreciate the benefits to be derived from silent communication, such as Maria was indulging in when we first saw them. The music of her laughter would soon prove fatal to melancholy, and before the brightness of her eyes, the clouds of sorrow be compelled to disappear. With the slight knowledge I possessed of the law of procedure here, I could easily understand her attendance and ministry upon Maria. It was another example of the unvarying and perfect fitness of every detail of this life to its requirement and necessity. What could be more opposite than this poor, wounded, crushed soul that it was occasioned by our own sin does not alter the fact, should be entrusted to the tender and patient care of a nurse, whom a painter would solicit from the gallery of dreams to sit as a model of charity. If throughout eternity heaven did no more than knit such hearts together in the close affection I had witnessed, it would, well, that would make it heaven. So I'll stop there, and we'll carry on in future days. But I hope that you appreciate that, because it does show it does just show the wonderfulness of heaven. And that's why I think it may be profitable and interesting for people to read about heaven and to understand the world of heaven and the world of the lower zone and the dark abyss. And I also talk about Jesus Christ in the book Heaven and Below, book 1 of Spiritism. I go through in great detail. Then I think the next book that would be interesting to you would be Spirits and the Spirit Universe, which is book 2, which talks all about spirits, who you are as a spirit, how you rise as a spirit, what your jobs are as a spirit, different career paths as a spirit. So much has been revealed to us in the books of Spiritism, especially by the books of the Reverend G. Val Owen, who was just a marvelous, marvelous person, much superior to many people, especially me. Then I would think the last book that you would want to the third book in the series, not the last book, I should say, but the last book in the series, is How We Are Guided by Spirits, how our spirit mentor, our guardian angel works, how our whole culture, how we are led to be, to improve, and how the whole human race is led, and the human culture and history is formed and guided by the spirit world. So I hope that gives you some idea of what is out there for you to learn about Spiritism. Again, and then the last book is, if you'd like to read, is, of course, I have many other books on my site, nwspiritism.com. And these books that I'm showing you are in paperback, in Audible, and Kindle format. Is The Spirit Realm, which is my latest book, because I really take everything I've read and give you an idea of the complexity and logic, and kind of go through a complete survey of the spirit realm and how it affects the physical realm and what we are and what our purpose is in the physical realm. So I hope this has been enjoyable for everybody, and please share this. Please, and if you have any questions, and remember, every Monday we have a Q&A about Spiritism. So if you have questions that interest you from this, put it in a comment. I get notified when I get comments. I'll take that and I'll put them in my list, and I'll cover them on Monday nights if I get to them. I'll cover the ones that are given to me live in the comment section first, but sometimes I'll cover quite a few questions. You never know. So anyway,